Have you ever wondered what happens when a deeply fractured family is pushed to the absolute breaking point? Well, in today's explainer, we're going to dive into an incredibly dramatic moment in biblical history. We're looking at a story of raw survival, hidden identities, and deep-seated, unresolved guilt. It's a fascinating, step-by-step walkthrough of a family in crisis.
Welcome to the Part S channel. Today we explain Genesis chapter 42 in a clear and simple way, step by step. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with a brief welcome and some context, then track the journey to Egypt, unpack how Joseph tests his brothers, follow their tense return to Jacob, clarify some key ideas, and finally, draw out some practical life lessons and recap the whole shebang.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, our welcome and brief context. We need to understand the dire situation that kicks off this whole chapter.
We're going to examine the simple, straightforward meaning of the text, what we call the pashhat, to really get a handle on the who, what, where, and why. Looking right at the primary text, verses 1 through 5, a severe regional famine has struck the land of Canaan, and I mean it is absolutely devastating the entire area. Jacob looks at his sons, who are basically paralyzed by this crisis, and he sharply rebukes them. He essentially asks, "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" It's a harsh wake-up call. He commands them to stop sitting around doing nothing and get down to Egypt to buy grain so their family won't die. For them, this isn't just an errand, it is quite literally a matter of life and death.
That brings us to section 2, the journey to Egypt. Let's track the brothers as they hit the road.
So the stakes are incredibly high as they leave their father's land. In verses 3 and 4, the text tells us that 10 of Joseph's brothers make the trip, but Jacob strictly, and I mean strictly, keeps his youngest son, Benjamin, at home because he's absolutely terrified that some kind of harm will come to him. This distinction right here is absolutely crucial. You see, Benjamin is Joseph's full brother. They share the same mother, Rachel. Jacob has already lost Joseph years ago under, highly suspicious circumstances. So he clearly favors Rachel's one remaining son and flat out refuses to let him out of his sight. Because of that, only the 10 older half-brothers join the caravan heading south.
Now, what's really fascinating about this timeline is what happens in verse 6. When the brothers finally arrive in Egypt, they step into the court of the governor, the man who is single-handedly selling grain to the entire world. And what do? They bow face down before him, completely unaware that this powerful Egyptian is actually their brother Joseph. Think about that for a second. If you recall the earlier chapters, this is the exact, literal fulfillment of the childhood dreams Joseph had, the very same dreams that made his brothers hate him enough to sell him into slavery in the first place. But they have absolutely no idea it's him. To them, he's just this intimidating, untouchable foreign official.
Okay, moving on to section 3, Joseph tests his brothers. This is where the tension really spikes.
We get this highly tense encounter in verses 7 through 13. Remembering those old dreams, Joseph recognizes his brothers instantly, but he completely hides his identity and pretends to be a harsh stranger. He demands to know, "Where do you come from?" And when they say Canaan, he aggressively accuses them. "You are spies. You have come to see where our land is unprotected." Now, why this specific accusation? Well, accusing foreigners of spying was actually a very common, realistic fear in that era. It's the perfect legitimate interrogation tactic for Joseph to dig into their family status without blowing his cover. Terrified, the brothers get extremely defensive and map out their whole family structure. They plead, "We are 12 brothers, the sons of one man. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more." I mean, the sheer irony here is just off the charts. They are literally telling Joseph that Joseph is dead, right to his face.
So how does Joseph test them? In verses 14 through 20, he initially locks them all up in custody for 3 solid days. Then, on the 3rd day, he shifts his demands. He says, "Do this, and you will live, for I fear God." He allows 9 of them to pack up grain and take it back to their starving families, but he takes Simeon and binds him right there in front of their eyes as collateral. He issues a crystal-clear ultimatum. To prove they aren't spies and to ever get Simeon back, they must bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, back to Egypt.
And this just brilliantly illustrates the emotional tension of verses 21 and 22. Under all this pressure, the brothers start turning on each other. They openly confess that they are being punished by God for shedding Joseph's blood decades ago. They say, "Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was, but we would not listen." Reuben even chimes in, asking, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy?" Meanwhile, here is the kicker. Joseph is using an interpreter. The brothers think this harsh Egyptian only speaks through a translator, so they're just speaking completely openly in front of him. But Joseph understands every single word of their profound guilt-ridden confession.
Overcome with secret grief, it totally humanizes him. He literally has to turn away and leave the room to weep before pulling himself together and returning to give his final orders.
Let's transition into section 4, returning to Jacob.
Following the text through verses 25 to 28, the remaining 9 brothers begin the heavy-hearted trek back to Canaan. Sure, they have food, but they're leaving a brother behind. At their night encampment, absolute panic sets in. One of the brothers opens his sack to feed his donkey and discovers that his silver has been secretly returned. Joseph had actually commanded his stewards to put their money right back into their sacks. So when they see this silver, their hearts just sink. They are already suspected of being spies, and now it looks like they're thieves who stole the governor's grain. Notice their immediate reaction. They tremble and ask, "What is this that God has done to us?" Because of that unresolved guilt they were just discussing, they instantly assume God is punishing them.
Moving into verses 29 through 34, they continue their journey and finally arrive back in Canaan. They sit down and recount this entire terrifying ordeal to their father Jacob. They map it out step by step, how the Egyptian lord of the land spoke so harshly, accused them of spying, and basically forced them to reveal their entire family structure. Then they have to deliver the crushing blow. Simeon is sitting in an Egyptian prison, and the absolute only way to get him back and to ever buy food again is to bring Benjamin down to Egypt.
But in verse 35, the fear escalates to a whole new level. They empty their sacks in front of Jacob, and they find that all 10 men have their pouches of silver returned. Earlier at the camp, maybe they thought just one sack had a weird accounting mistake. But now, as they unpack, every single pouch of silver is lying right there. The text states that both the brothers and their father were absolutely terrified. To them, this doesn't look like a gift. It looks exactly like a massive deliberate trap has been set to destroy them. In verse 36, Jacob falls into just agonizing despair. He cries out that he has already lost Joseph, he's lost Simeon, and he flatly refuses to let them take Benjamin. He yells, "You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you want to take Benjamin? Everything is against me." This gives us a really fascinating pashhat insight into Jacob's psychology. Notice he specifically says, "You have deprived me." On some level, he has never fully trusted these older brothers regarding what really happened to Joseph all those years ago.
So, in verse 37, Reuben desperately tries to step up and take responsibility as the firstborn. He offers to let Jacob put his own 2 sons to death if he fails to bring Benjamin back. Actually, scratch that. It's not just a desperate bargain, it's total chaos. Logically, what good would it possibly do Jacob to execute his own grandsons if he loses Benjamin? It makes 0 sense, and Jacob completely and utterly rejects this extreme offer.
Verse 38 is really the tragic emotional core of this entire chapter. Jacob declares that Benjamin is the only son left of his mother, Rachel. By saying his brother is dead and he is the only one left, he painfully and clearly isolates Rachel's children from the rest of the brothers. He warns them that if any harm comes to Benjamin on this journey, it will bring his gray head down to Sheol in sorrow. In biblical Hebrew, Sheol refers to the grave, or the realm of the dead, a state of utter misery. He's saying that losing Benjamin would literally kill him.
Now for section 5, clarifications and key ideas. Let's pause and unpack a few things.
Let's clarify a few essential dynamics directly from the simple, literal meaning of this text. First, Joseph deliberately uses an interpreter to maintain his disguise. Culturally speaking, an Egyptian governor would never eat with or speak directly in the language of Hebrews, so it makes his disguise absolutely perfect. Second, despite this incredibly harsh test, he secretly ensures that their sacks are full of grain and provisions. Why? Well, because he doesn't actually want them to starve. He is testing them to see if they've changed, like, will they abandon Rachel's other son the same way they abandoned him? But underneath it all, he still profoundly cares for his family's physical survival.
Finally, section 6, lessons and our final recap. Let's bring it all together.
If we distill this dramatic sequence into practical life lessons derived right from the literal text, this chapter profoundly shows us the crushing weight of unresolved guilt. When they were accused of spying, the brothers' minds immediately jumped back decades to their sin. Guilt haunts us, doesn't it? It always surfaces during hardship. We also clearly see the tragedy of a fractured family. Jacob's blatant favoritism and his total lack of trust in his older sons just continues to create massive dysfunction. Yet, amidst all of that, we also see the vital beginnings of accountability, as the brothers finally acknowledge their past wrongs out loud for the first time.
Okay, let's do a quick recap of the ground we covered today in our explainer. We started with our welcome and brief context, followed the journey to Egypt, watched as Joseph tested his brothers, and then unpacked their tense return to Jacob. We also went through some key clarifications and practical life lessons.
We've seen a family driven by a devastating famine right into the hands of the very brother they betrayed. But the massive, looming question remains. Will Jacob eventually be forced to risk his most beloved son, Benjamin, just to save his family from starvation? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.